audio and visual podcast, a weekly discussion about all things guitar building and some random tangents as well, featuring members of the Guitar Builders Collective from all around the world. The Guitar Builders Collective is a like-minded group of individuals that have come together to share their experiences, knowledge, and inspiration for guitar building. Each week you can join us in the live YouTube chat or catch up at a later point. It's also available as audio, where you'll miss out on seeing our lovely faces and some of the visuals we share along the way. You can also find the Guitar Builders Collective via our forum, over on Instagram, where we share images of members' builds. We've got a thriving Facebook group, and we do hope that no matter what your experience and knowledge is, you'll become a welcome member of this community too. Great. Hello, people. Welcome.
Hello.
Yeah, just a small group at the moment. Scott's hopefully going to join us in a minute. He's having, I guess, technical issues or whatever. But yeah, so Mark and myself are here, Daniel, and we're joined once again by Owen from Entropia Guitars. Although, Owen, when you came on last time, I think it was back in May or March. It was one of the months beginning with M. I think, were you called Entropia Guitars then?
Only in my head. So it was the name I was rattling around with for a long time, and I had to come up with some sort of name. It couldn't just be Owen Makes Guitars. And I really like the word entropy, because entropy is kind of this state of uncertainness and confusion and lack of data. And it was kind of really that's me. I'm building my first guitar. And then I started looking at different translations for it across European languages, and Entropia seems to be a common one. So I was like, oh, that sounds cool. I'll go with that. And then there's a really great Muse song, State of Entropy. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to definitely pick that name. And that's been it. And I asked my other half as a graphic designer. So I asked her to make me some logos, and she did. And then another friend of hers works in TV doing animated intros to TV shows and stuff like that. So she made me a little animated version of my logo for when I eventually go on YouTube. And I got these little badges made up by a guy on Etsy, so I just dropped them into my headstocks as well. So the logo came together quickly, but the big challenge is I have about 20 of these, which puts me under pressure to make about 20 guitars.
Or find 10 places to put them on 2 guitars.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, before we get any more into that, last time you were on, Owen, we were talking about loads of different things. We didn't really focus in on your history and your connection to guitar building. So we're going to talk about all of that today. I also want to talk about what the Guitar Builders Collective is and how we're all part of this group of people that build together. Because last week, Mike, who was on from In Gold Designs design company, sent me a message afterwards saying, how does one become a member of the collective? So I definitely want to get onto that a bit later on. And we were just talking off air about mass-produced guitars and costs, and that's something that I'm really intrigued in, because if people don't really know much about you yet, Owen, you're a signature artist for Mark Bass.
Yes, kind of. Yeah. So I have a really good relationship with the company. I've been over and back to them quite a bit since, I guess, a little bit before the pandemic. So I started playing bass probably in my early 30s. So that's, as you can see by my face, about 2 years ago. And when I was in Paris, I did what all musicians do. I wanted to go and see a music shop somewhere and see what's available. So up in the Pigalle district in Paris, there's a whole street and it's just music shops. There's a shop for PA stuff, there's a shop for keyboards, and there's about 5 shops for bass. And I went into one called Bassmaniac, and down the back, they just had stacks and stacks of these yellow amps that I'd never seen before. And I played them and I was like, oh, these are really nice. So I came home and I'd intended to buy one, and I picked a used one up, and I picked a new amp head up and things like that. And I gave it for a while. And then I started engaging with the company on social media. And they were very good to me. So even back then when I didn't know them, I bought an amp. I don't know if you can see it. If I turn the webcam maybe this way a tiny bit. Do you see that tiny one under the Apple logo?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like a little 6-inch combo, right? And it's a 50-watt thing. But they were charging, when that came out, I think about €400. And I picked one up on eBay that was broken. And I wrote to them going, look, there's nobody in Ireland repairing these. Can I send it to you and will you fix it? And they said, sure. And they sent it back repaired free of charge. And this friendship kind of just struck up from there. Hey, Scott.
Hey, well.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. So the friendship kind of just picked up from there. And then they said, look, if you're ever in Italy, drop into the factory. And it turns out my sister was getting married in Italy. So I did a bit of a road trip, visited the factory, got to know them really well, came home, and they had insisted on sending over a few amplifiers as a kind of a, nice to meet you type thing, which was really great. And then they asked me to help out a little bit with, doing things like English translations and making some demo videos for them and stuff like that. So it kind of snowballed from there. And I was over in Italy on a motorbike tour last year, and I visited the guys at a music exhibition there, and they kind of said, yeah, we're just going to make it official and add you to the artist list. So that was pretty cool. So it's kind of funny because obviously in the room you can see a lot of black and yellow, right? But there's Mark bass amps here. This is a Mark bass bass. This is a Mark bass bass. This is a DV Mark guitar amp. So they do bass and guitar and make the instruments. And then over here, that's a Mark bass drum kit. And,
oh wow, I didn't know.
And that's a Mark bass PA system up at the top. So there's a bunch of stuff that they do. And when I was building my recording studio, well, it's not a recording studio, it's a jam room more than anything else here. But when I was building it, I was like, I might as well just get all this stuff and put it together. They don't do drums anymore, Daniel. If you're going to lead with that next, they got into, I think, a bit of a challenge with Roland around some patents and stuff like that. But they made a beautiful drum kit, and there's very few of them available. And I found one in Poland that was just in the boxes, and the guy said, I'll take 700 euros for it. And I went, will you take 600 euros for it? And he said,
Very good. Very good. So look, I'm going to dig down on this. You're not just anyone, though, that has a problem with an amp and contacts them. If you're interacting on Instagram with them, etc., or social media, presumably you're gigging a lot.
Yeah, I gig a fair bit.
Like a musician, maybe.
I gig a fair bit. I don't I'm not famous or anything, but I would gig a fair bit here in Ireland. I spent my 20s playing as a lead guitarist, touring Ireland in lots of different little bands and stuff like that. I've played tiny venues, I've played big venues. I've recorded on some game soundtracks and things like that. So from that perspective, it's just do you know what? It's a bit of everything. It's not one thing in particular that stands out and you can point to it and go, isn't that great? It's all kind of middle of the road, mediocre stuff, and you kind of go, they all add up a little bit.
I like that consistent touring and performing is like a staple of lots of musicians. But I guess when I was thinking when I was younger what it'd be like to be a musician when I grew up, you only think of it as being in a band, one band, and that band's going to be big. You don't think about that whole kind of everyday gigging. I think we mentioned last week, both Dave and myself have been watching some Rick Beato interviews recently, and a number of the musicians that he interviews, like Rick Wakeman, started their career as session musicians, playing for loads of bands. Even when he first started in Yes, he was still playing in loads of bands. He said he'd recorded over 2,000 sessions. And kind of that is how a musician works. So do you do session work as well? Or did you do session?
I did a tiny bit of it years ago, not much. So it's not really something that is prevalent here in Ireland. A lot of originals bands that are out there that make it just have their own core musicians and they stick with them. So the session thing isn't really huge here, but the amount of musicians per capita in Ireland is probably one of the highest densities globally. Everybody here either is into music or plays music, and that's probably because it rains so much and there's not much to do. You can't go to outdoor festivals, you can't really have an exciting outdoor life. So your choices are play a sport or go to the pub. And if you go to the pub, there's going to be musicians playing in the pub to entertain people. I realize that sounds like a massive stereotype, but it's the reality. If you go into my city here, close to me, it's about 20 minutes away, Cork, on any night of the week, there's probably somewhere upwards of 10 to 12 gigs happening, and that ramps up at the weekend. And it's not a big city. The city is well, it's a bit more now, but it used to have about 160, 180,000 people. It's not a big city. But music is very prevalent to everything here. All the schools have music programs. Kids are encouraged to pick up instruments everywhere you go. So it's cool. It's great. The weird thing is, though, having like all of these musicians who play a lot, is that a lot of bands will start up and split after a very short period of time. But we also have no music shops left because of Thomond. So we had, a good density of music shops, but we really, like, every city is down to kind of one or two that stock the same stuff as everybody else. So you can go in and you can see the same Fender Telecaster in 9 different colors, but it's the same Fender Telecaster. And you can see the same Gibson Les Paul with slightly different woods, but it's the same Gibson Les Paul. There's just no variety. So everybody ends up buying online, which is a shame, but that's kind of how it's gone.
It's a shame. I wonder if, because one of the things about the UK is we have all of these guitar shows. They're everywhere and throughout the year. Is there anything like that happening in Ireland?
I don't think so. I think most Irish people tend to travel to the UK for shows. I know, like, my other hobbies, I'm into motorbikes and stuff like that, and a lot of the shows for that would be like in Birmingham in the NEC. So none of that really happens here. We have smaller scale ones that people tend to spin up, but they don't have the same level of support from distributors and manufacturers that they would have in the UK.
It's a bit of a shame for somewhere that's so music orientated. I always think of, if we think of a stereotypical Irish pub, there's people that just walk in and play with each other musically.
Phrasing, please. Yeah, it does happen. Like, there's open mic sessions everywhere. There's there's jam sessions everywhere. You can just rock up with your instrument, and it's not genre specific either. There's jazz nights, there's trad Irish music nights, there's rock nights. So yeah, it's whatever you want to do, really. So it's pretty good. But the music scene here is great. We have a huge school of music in Cork City. It's probably one of the biggest in Europe, and it originally started back in like the 1960s. And my brother was one of the first music students that went there, and I went there. I started playing actually violin when I was 3. So it was the very young age, but if I didn't do it that year, they did boys one year and girls the next in the school, so I would have had to wait until I was 5. So my mother threw me into playing violin pretty young, and the school of music was great. I did classical music until I was kind of around 15, and then I decided I was going to buy an electric guitar, and my mother said to me, "You don't know how to play an electric guitar?" And I was like, "Yep, but I'm going to figure it out. Like everybody else who buys an electric guitar, we'll figure it out and get going." And went down that path. But that school just expanded a couple of years ago, and to give you an idea of the scale, they put in the single biggest order of Steinway pianos ever. They ordered something like 55 or 56 Steinway pianos for the building. It's incredible. Enormous. Yeah, it's enormous. And they do degrees in music production, contemporary music, traditional music, classical music. It's a great place.
That's such a stark difference between the United States, where we don't have music programs, anything like that or near that. It's a shame. But it's awesome for you guys.
I think the closest thing you guys would have that kind of resonates globally would be maybe Berkeley. But Berkeley's on like a different level completely. That's I don't have any experience at Berkeley, but from the limited exposure I've had of it, it seems to just be a conveyor belt for churning out really high class touring musicians.
Oh, I attended Berkeley. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow. It seems like a pretty amazing place, to be honest.
Yeah, for music production, yeah.
So Berkeley does production as well as kind of performance.
Yeah.
I think my only knowledge really of Berkeley is a couple of YouTubers that I follow, like the guitarist Samurai guitarist. I think he might even teach there, but he definitely studied there. And then there's a bass player on Scott's bass lessons who teaches there at the moment. And they're always when she's introduced anyway, it's often with that as an underpinning, the fact that she went there as that's the standard, like the gold standard of performance. So it's interesting they do music production as well.
Yeah.
So is Cork like an easy destination for people in Europe to get to? Owen, if that's...
Yeah, pretty easy. We've got direct flights from London, loads of direct flights, and actually a lot of UK destinations, because a lot of Irish people will go over for football matches and things like that to the UK. And also because we don't have direct links to a lot of the bigger cities. So most people, when they're traveling, they tend to hop to London first and then go from there to wherever they want to go next, whether that's the US or Australia or Asia somewhere. So there's quite a lot of Irish people who travel back and forth to the UK quite a bit. And then we've direct flights to all the usual spots. So like Spain, Italy, France, Germany, all those kind of places, Amsterdam. So yeah, it's pretty easy to get in and out of, which is
so a good hub for having a big school like that then.
Yeah, it's great. And we have an international jazz festival that happens every October, although it's not a lot of jazz these days. It's kind of maybe 20% jazz and the rest is just assorted shit thrown together with a jazz sticker thrown on top of it. Like they had some, 80s rock bands headlining last year for the jazz festival, which was a bit bizarre. But for years, people would travel you'd have Creole bands coming from New Orleans and stuff just to come over and perform. It had that prestige and it was jam-packed, and everywhere you looked in the city, there was a guy with a double bass wheeling it somewhere and things like that. So it was cool. And I hope it goes back to that. But at the moment, it's still a really good place to come and gig, but it used to be an awful lot better.
So you were saying that you were touring as a lead guitarist.
Yeah.
Is that what you said? So when did your move to guitar or bass come from guitar? When did that happen, or what triggered it?
Well, actually, what triggered it is really interesting. My grandfather was a bass player in Cork, but he was a pretty well-known guy. He was in the Cork Symphony Orchestra for 50 years, and he was playing in the local opera house and the pit for any of the musicals that were on. And he used to he was in the army as part of the army band as well, so they would tour and play quite a lot around Ireland and in public events. And I don't know what happened, but there was a picture shared by a family member of him in the army band just playing on a double bass, and I thought, oh, that looks really cool. And then a cousin of mine said, you look very like him, and I didn't see the resemblance. And then, after a while, I did see the resemblance, and I was like, geez, I might give bass a shot. And I didn't really think any more of it. And as tends to happen, I woke up after a weekend session to an email in my inbox saying, congratulations on your purchase, it will ship soon. Which ended up being this bass, this ESP 6-string. Having never played bass before, I was like, I'm going to get a 6-string apparently. And I bought an amp from Ibanez, and the two of them came, and about 6 months later, I was in a band playing bass, which was fun. But that bass it's got the nicest neck I've ever played on a bass guitar. And I think it's made from depleted uranium because it weighs about 900 kilograms, and you can't keep it on your shoulder for more than an hour before it really hurts. I don't know who designed it, but yeah, that was a hard lesson learned buying that one. But that was the impetus, picking it up and getting into it. And then I just really found that, there's something really cool about playing groove and laying back and building up, things that people don't expect from the bass. Like people don't expect bass players to. If there's what I used to do in that band is the other lead guitarists would have some little licks and stuff, but on the original track they'd be harmonized, and I could harmonize them on the 6-string and then go back to playing bass. So stuff like that was interesting, and people don't expect it, and that's what I really like is, people expect the bass player to turn up with a bass and an amp and that's it, and all you're ever going to get out of them is the root note and the fifth note, and anything else costs more money. But then, I love using things like pedal boards over here to put in synthy sounds into it, or really heavy distortions or things like that.
So, Owen, is that pedal board for bass or is it for guitar?
That's for bass.
Nice. I realized I don't recognize a single pedal on there.
Oh, yeah, give us a breakdown.
Yeah.
Yes. Give me a second.
And anyone that's watching in the future, pause the video now and write in the comments to put your guesses in before he tells us.
Okay, so it's a bit of a beast, and it's probably too big for what it is. But here we go. So there's Mel 9, which kind of does things like flute and string sounds and orchestral choirs and things like that. And there's a Key 9, which does things like Wurlitzers. And if you want that Doors kind of keyboard sound like in Riders of the Storm, you've got that there. This is a vocal effects pedal. So things like harmonies, distortions, dropping yourself down an octave, doing that kind of megaphone voice on songs, which is pretty cool. That's a tube preamp for bass. Damn, this thing is heavy. This is an Eventide H90, so that's doing all the heavy lifting in terms of processing for sound and stuff like that. This guy's an expression volume pedal from Hotone, and just a wireless on the top, and that's it. So, yeah.
It's so interesting having the two electroharmonic pedals, which I always associate with guitar, being for guitar.
Yeah, they work relatively well on bass. They kind of lose the tracking on the low E, and they're gone completely on the low B. They're just not there. But the purpose of them really is just to add some layers into songs, and when you do that, you're probably going to be higher up anyway in the registers doing that. So they work quite well for that, and they're only they're not using them for a whole song. They're using them for a lick here and there, and that's it.
So look, Owen, I've put in the description to the video and the audio where everyone's listening links to your Instagram, also to your YouTube, which I know is just beginning to be built up. But should I be adding links to some music for you? Where can we hear you playing?
You won't. You absolutely won't. There's some awful videos on YouTube of me playing live on stage in places, and I wouldn't inflict them on anybody, really. They're horrendous, and you would all unfollow me instantly and never speak to me again. There's some fun stuff. Like I was in a band called Sucker Punch for a while, and we played some really cool venues, like down in West Cork. There's a really fun venue called Gutierrez. It's kind of known as one of those hallowed live music spots in West Cork. And when Thin Lizzy had to break up years ago, the bass player from Thin Lizzy used to hang, not the bass player because he's dead, Jesus, the drummer from Thin Lizzy used to hang out down there and put on lots of live sessions and stuff. So it's got a lot of kudos and pedigree and stuff, but we did some gigs there, and people turned up with cameras and recorded it, and some of that is up on YouTube. But honestly, I'm not a camera guy, which is why I'm probably really struggling to start the YouTube channel too. I'm like, nah, don't want to do it. But I do want to do it, but I don't want to do it. But yeah.
But obviously having a YouTube channel is essential for all the commenting, because you're one of the regulars in the chat.
Yeah. And I'm really passionate about watching other people doing work. Like it's really important to me. I've learned a crazy amount from YouTube. I know everybody says that, but like, it's been phenomenal for me to upskill, having never touched building a guitar before, to be able to see people teach for free everything you want to know. And like, they're not asking anything in return. They're just saying, please subscribe and click like, and you're kind of going, that's the best deal ever. Absolutely. Makes perfect sense. And you get education on everything. Like, there's guys out there who'll put up an hour tutorial on how to make a nut. Like, if you're going to a guitar building school, you're going to pay a crazy amount of money for that, and you might not get the same level of care and expertise that you get from that guy who's making that video, trying to get as many people to like it as possible. He's putting in 110% effort making that video and editing it and making it good. And I don't think people realize, maybe they do, but I don't think people necessarily appreciate, to the point where they should, the level of information and expertise and helpfulness that's out there in the community. It's incredible. It really is. And, I've messaged guys who have hundreds of subscribers, thousands of subscribers, asking questions, and they take the time to reply. Some of them have had video calls with me saying, why don't we just chat it out, hold up your piece of work and we'll talk about it. I don't know any other community that would do that.
Yeah, absolutely. We always say how great the guitar building community is, but I think there are lots of other niche communities where people are so passionate that they are like that. So I've just been on lots of Ghostbuster forums for the last few months because of the guitar I'm building, it's Ghostbuster themed, and people there are also so friendly and so supportive. It doesn't feel like a toxic place at all. And that's what I feel like, as you're saying, guitars are like. So having that crossover of Ghostbusters and guitars has been pretty fun for me.
Yeah, but it's kind of like the antidote to social media, because social media has become a cesspit. But then the groups within social media for shared hobbies and shared interests and shared sports are actually kind of wholesome. So it's nice to see that. people aren't just shouting at each other all day and going, oh, that's what a Biden supporter would say, or that's what a Trump supporter would say. Kind of going, no, just hold the chisel a slightly different way and hit it harder. It's great.
Yeah. Well, that shit, I'm hoping will settle down, because it was just I'm on a lot of meme pages. I'm a memeaholic. And we got to a point a few months ago where all the good stuff went away and everything was just political arguments. And I'm like, where's all the funny stuff? Yeah. And we're still kind of in that mode, but I'm really hoping everything gets back to just give me some funny stuff.
Yeah, I think it will, but I think we're just really lucky as well that, you know, the kind of places that we hang out online as builders, as makers, tend to be a little bit more. I'm not going to say dry, because there is a lot of humor in what we do as well, but it's definitely more focused and more supportive. And you know, I hope social media goes that way at some point, because, you know, I wouldn't have found the Guitar Builders Collective. I wouldn't have, as I said earlier, engaged with the lads from ArcBase if I hadn't had the access to those types of groups and things as well. And I've had a lot of positives come out of social media, particularly living in an isolated spot like Ireland. Like, if I need to go and find where to buy tone wood, I have nowhere here to go and buy tone wood. There's nobody in Ireland doing it. And I can go on to the GBC and say, hey guys, where are you getting your wood from? And then I can go and order it. You know, it opens up just that level of communication we wouldn't have had 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Yeah, it's great.
Again, the Great Guitar Build Up just made us all aware of each other, which was pretty awesome. There are a number of us that have stayed in contact, for years now, and regularly talk. And it's kind of funny. I've thought about this a time or two recently with all the craziness. Nobody talks about religion or politics. We just instinctively know. People in another state are going to have a different opinion. People on the other side of the planet, their perspective is going to be so much different that just a recipe for disaster. But when it comes to the community, and we've talked about this before too, Facebook tends to still be pretty toxic. Generally, there's still some good wholesome places where, but everywhere else, Instagram, YouTube, everywhere else that we've run into, you know, builders, everybody's nice. In 8 years, 9 years, something like that, of doing YouTube, I've had 2 or 3 shitty comments ever.
Yeah.
You know? And it always blows my mind when it happens. I'm like, how, of all the horrible things out there, and you know, opinion, perspective, that type of stuff that you could have an adverse reaction to, somebody trying to just build something and add some value to the world, why would you have a problem with this? But but in all of those places, it seems so rare. Most people just are just helpful. Jiu-jitsu is a whole nother world. I see a lot of parallels there. It's a situation where almost nobody who's serious about it really has any kind of an ego problem, and they're just looking to help other people. You know, it's one of those little pockets where everybody just seems to care about each other, and you know, realize that we're all trying to improve, and we're all you can't really compare yourself to somebody else. Your journey is completely different, you know. I don't know.
I mean, could it just be that as soon as you have a community where they're not talking about religion or politics, everything's nice? I mean, it might not be that, but I don't know. But yeah, when you find something you're passionate about and other people are passionate, it does spark that. And while we're talking about this, then, Owen, we'll definitely come back to more about your building, and I want to share your current workshop that you're building, because there's some pictures of that up. I just quickly mention there's links to the Guitar Builders Collective forum and Facebook groups in the description to this episode, as there is always. So do go and check us out there and join the community. The Instagram tends to be a place where we're sharing each other's builds. So if you're someone that regularly interacts with the Guitar Builders Collective, one of your posts will probably get shared. Facebook seems to be mainly people talking about the builds they're working on and asking questions. And the forum is much more in-depth, I think, people asking more in-depth questions. A number of years ago, I went to a wedding, and it was someone I worked with, and I was sat on a table with a group of people that were all friends with the bride, and I was asking how they knew each other, and they'd all met in the early days of online forums, and they'd all become friends through the forums. Yeah. And I just thought that was such a weird thing, and now they all have met up and since become like close friends and etc. Even think some of them got married, but whatever. And from what one of you just mentioned, I definitely don't use Facebook like some of my friends use Facebook. I just use it for the groups, for those forums and those interactions. And it's such a great space for that.
Yeah, I think so. It's funny, like Scott mentioned, the Great Guitar Build-Off is kind of being the I guess the nucleus of how everything kicked off and started. That was really my springboard into thinking about guitar building, because I really didn't start guitar building until last year, and really only halfway through last year. But what had happened was just prior to COVID, I had finished building the house here, and I had a load of woodwork tools left over. Not nearly enough to go making guitars, because it's you need so many more tools to make guitars than you need to make a house. Really, I mean, that's the reality of it. But I had all these tools sitting there, and I was on YouTube daily looking at carpentry videos, or hey, can I make a chest of drawers, or a little bedside table for having breakfast in bed and things like that. And then I was watching guys doing covers of songs and stuff like that. Everybody was doing that during COVID. Everybody was recording remote covers of their bands together and stuff like that. And I think the algorithm in YouTube just went, you like guitars, you like woodworking, how about this? And all of a sudden I had Ben Crow on my screen, talking about the Great Guitar Build-Off, and then getting to see builders and follow them. And once I clicked on one video, there was about 4 million came straight in afterwards. Subscribe to all these people, please, right now. And you kind of tried to watch everybody, but you find your favorites and you kind of lock into those. And in the early days for me, I watched a lot of Daniel from Unquender, who's just a natural teacher. We all say that. Scott, Gio, loads and loads of guys like that just have that sort of, I'm not just going to record myself making a guitar, I'm going to walk you through the processes. And for me, looking at this for the first time, I was like, okay, it kind of looks achievable. Got more and more into it, and then started just, every now and again, I'd buy a tool, I'd buy a router, or I'd buy something else, and kind of got to the middle of last year and I had enough tools to give things a go. I'm still buying 1 or 2 bits of machinery that are actually due here this week, I think, or Monday. But I have nearly everything now at this stage to be able to get at it. But I didn't feel comfortable enough to get at it until I had everything. I'm probably on some sort of a spectrum that says collect all the tools, build one guitar, and then give it up and have all the tools. But I'm not going to let that happen. So yeah, it's great though. I love just the whole getting into the workshop and throwing on some music and taking a big piece of wood and making it slightly smaller and gluing that to another piece of wood that you made slightly smaller. And that moment when I put strings on it blew my mind away. And it went from being a plank of wood to something that you can actually play a song on. And I don't think I'll get over that. I'm really looking forward to doing that again. So it's great. Oh yeah, you're showing my dirty workshop. Thanks, Daniel.
And your workshop, yeah. And the amazing floor. It just occurs to me, if I scroll down on Instagram, am I going to find pictures of the guitar you built?
Yeah, you'll have to dive a little bit because there's lots of dogs. So there you go. You're into the kind of the guitar building phase here now.
Guitar to bass.
Yeah, the thing is, I decided to make a guitar because I've always wanted a Telecaster, but there's a lot of things about the Telecaster I dislike. I think if you were to release the Telecaster in 2024, having never put it on the market before, people would look at it and go, it's too heavy, the headstock is ugly, the bridge is terrible, but it gets a lot of kudos and respect because of the nostalgia attached to it. And it is a great instrument, but there's just things that I wanted to change about it. I wanted to have more modern electrics. I wanted to have better woods. I wanted binding. I wanted a different fretboard, and I wanted to just use my own. I've kind of, even though I have only built one guitar and I have all the woods next to me here for my next one, I've kind of come up with my own design language now at this stage. I have, it's basically nice woods, laminated necks, matching whatever's on the body top to the headstock with the veneer. That's really important to me. I just think that provides a nice synergy to it. And I also match the top of the body wood to the laminated strips in the neck. So that neck has 2 pieces of rosewood running down through it. The next one will have 2 pieces of ebony running down through it, or it does already. And the headstock is an interesting choice for me because I didn't realize it until I had designed it, that it actually looks a little bit, now you have to kind of squint a little bit, but it looks like the main island of Cork on a map, which is completely accidental, but I'm going to take the credit for it because I think that's a nice little touch too.
Cool.
But yeah, it's just one of the things. I was having a chat with Gio. I rang Gio on a video call just to talk about carving the neck, because funnily enough, carving the neck was the thing I was most stressed about, getting that curve right and getting the volute and getting the heel transition right. And it turned out to be the least stressful thing ever. In fact, it was actually really nice to do it. But that fear before I started, Gio offered a video call, and when we were chatting, he was saying, he was chatting about the wood choices in the guitar, and he said, it's nice to see somebody building a guitar, but not necessarily doing it with the cheapest wood off the shelf for the first time around. And that himself and Todd had talked about doing a video series. I don't think they've done it yet, but I'm probably stepping on their feet a little bit. But they were talking about why your first guitar doesn't have to look like a first guitar. You're going to spend money on woods. You're going to spend money on hardware. Why not just dive in and get it right first day? And if it goes wrong, it's going to go wrong anyway. Whether it goes wrong with cheap wood or slightly more expensive wood, it's going to go wrong. But if it goes right, you end up with something that's really, really nice, and you can kind of hold it aloft and go, I have made something that is not a pile of shit, and I can play a chord. Ta-da.
I have always preached the opposite, just because in my experience, the first thing you build is going to be a piece of shit. And everybody seems to just want to jump in with the most expensive stuff imaginable, seems like. But I don't know. It might be kind of like, giving advice on buying your first guitar. The 2 schools of thought, get something that's cheap because the kid's probably not going to stick with it. But if you get something cheap and shitty, he's not going to stick with it.
Yeah, that's actually really good. Yeah.
Now, there's got to be some middle ground. I think there's got to be some place in the middle, right? There's no just 2 ends of the spectrum. And I guess my experience was I did have a first guitar build, but prior to that, I built a lot of just bodies with cheap wood. So it wasn't necessarily my first guitar. It was just practicing on cheap wood. Because I promise you, when I had that first telly on the router table, that thing just shot out. I just went the wrong way, and it shot off the table. And that's going to happen, right? But I'm glad it happened with those cheap practice runs. So my first guitar was with really nice wood, but I didn't start with just the first guitar. It was just parts before that.
There's definitely something to be said if you're looking forward to making something so much that what you're using is nice and good. And maybe not so much with the wood choices, but potentially having the good wood, it just feels nicer when you're making. Definitely having the good tools feels nicer when you're making.
Yeah, I'd like to thank the entire community for, absolutely destroying my wallet for the last year, because every time I watch somebody's video, they're holding this chisel going, here's this Iwasaki rasp I bought, and it's the best thing ever. And it's only $50, but then in Europe, it's like €90. And then to get it to Ireland, it's another €30. So I end up buying tools. But honestly, there's worse things a guy could be spending his money on, right?
Yeah.
I've got a screwdriver that cost me about £30 that's really nice from Narex. And for various reasons I won't go into now, someone came round to our house today to lift up the manhole covers to check the drains outside. And he didn't have a screwdriver that was big enough. So I had to give him my unused, pristine £30 screwdriver to see him doing this on the manhole cover and levering it up. That's a bit nice. He was like, "This is an amazing screwdriver." Yeah. Thanks, mate.
Oh, the tightrope of the wood quality. My first several builds were absolute garbage, but at the same time, wood combinations and usually a very specific piece of wood was very often the real heavy motivation to do something. So I get the desire. But then I look at some of those early builds and I'm like, man, I wasted that wood on that thing.
Yeah, there's a piece for me as well. I mean, it might just be the accessibility of the woods as well, right? But I can't get anything locally other than pine in the local builder's yard, which has had more twists than chubby checker. But that stuff, when I'm importing it, I have to pay crazy shipping anyway. So, I'm importing crap with crazy shipping, or I'm importing things that are slightly better with crazy shipping. And financially, it's honestly, if you're going to get hit for a penny, you might as well get hit for a pound. So I just bring in stuff that's slightly better and see how it goes. I'm planning. So one thing I haven't said actually on this video yet, I think I said it back in May, is my brother makes violins. So we don't cross over. The skill sets don't intersect. And I wasn't chatting to him about the guitar. I was just sending him pictures going, hey, this is how far I haven't messed up so far. And he'd send back a thumbs up or a thumbs down or things like that. But we've been planning a trip to maybe head to Europe at some point and just go to a tone wood supplier and just, two of us have a weekend having some beers, buying some wood and getting it shipped back in bulk, because this doing it piecemeal is a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Hey, so look, there's loads of things connected to this, but I just want to mention in the live chat, Eddie from Electric Lady Guitars has just said, totally agree about wood quality, about good wood, because Jeopardy is the best tutor. It makes you focus.
Yeah.
I like that as a concept.
That's
I
fantastic.
better not go wrong here. I better not make a mistake because I've spent so much on it. Look, people that might be listening can't see what we're talking about, and we've gone on a bit about your build. Maybe we could just go back and break down what you've actually put in it, Owen.
Yeah, sure.
On the screen. It's on Owen's Instagram, so if you are listening, you can find the link in the descriptions and go and check it out.
Yeah, so it's basically the first piece of wood I bought for it was the fretboard. So I was over in Italy on a motorbike tour, and I went to this music exposition called Sound Expo, and there was a tone wood supplier literally as you came in the door called Filbo, and I got chatting to them, and I have a bass that has an olive wood top, and I really liked it. And I'd seen Gio make a guitar with an olive wood fretboard as well before, and it looks stunning. And so when I seen he did that, I knew it was a suitable wood for fretboard. So I just bought that on spec, and I went, I'll figure out the rest later. And then I kind of knew I wanted a rosewood top from watching, I think, one of Todd's videos. And then it started to form a picture from there. So I'm like, okay, if the top is rosewood, it needs to be contrasted with the olive, but I want something to contrast again at the headstock. So that's where the idea to match the body wood to the headstock veneer came in. And that's something I'm going to stick with. The next body I'm doing is it's flamed maple, and I'm going to cut a veneer off the offcut I have for that and run it through the drum sander and have that as my headstock. And then as well as that, I try and match that to the woods in the laminate of the neck as well. So the neck tends to be quarter sawn maple with laminated strips of wood, and in this case they were laminate strips of rosewood on the back. And the body was a one-piece bit of alder for no other reason than it was pretty cheap on the website when I was clicking through. But it turned out to be a nice piece of wood to work with, so I'm not going to complain. There's plastic binding on it, and that's held on. I know everybody said to use acetone when you're putting it on, or super glue. I didn't want to use super glue because it's messy as anything, but I couldn't find acetone locally unless I was going to go to a hairdresser supplies. And even though I have long hair, I kind of gave that a bit of a dodge. So I used paint thinners, which worked perfectly. I did it on an offcut, and I just rubbed some paint thinners onto the back of the binding, and it adhered instantly almost. So that was great. There's Goto hardware, so Goto locking tuners. There's Goto bridge. There's threaded inserts on the neck just to make sure you get that really tight joint in there. And then there's stainless steel frets, which are the work of the devil, but I also like them. There's something really cool about having them finished. There's something absolutely miserable and depressing about having to work with them. They are unfriendly, unfair to work with. Oh my God, yeah, but they're great. And then the only other thing I put into it then is I put in, there's a Greg Koch, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing his name right, I hope I am. He's a famous Telecaster player, but he did a set of Fishman Fluence pickups and electronics that I just bought and slotted in. And it's got a really cool little boost button thing. So when you're on either pickup and you hit the boost button, it just gives you a minor increase in volume that if you're doing any licks or a bit of soloing, that you just have that little lift. So that was a nice bit of kit to fit in. So yeah, that was pretty cool. And then it's just finished in mostly Osmo poly oil, hard wax oil. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There's not much else to say. Oh, one of the other things I do in them as well is I do, I don't know if this will come up on camera, but I'll try and show it to you anyway. I do, I put this in all of my guitars, but I really like them. They're flush mounted strap locks.
Oh, yeah.
So they go into the body.
Why do you like, what's good about them?
I think the thing about strap locks for me is that they always just look like something that's been stuck on. It's an aesthetic thing. They're like the nipples of the guitar. I don't know. I'm just going to throw that one out there. But they also, like, anytime I've had a guitar with like exposed strap pins or strap locks, they tend to work their way loose over time because you stand the guitar on them, or you're hanging the guitar off them, and they get levered in and out as you're working with them. I'm doing my Donald Trump dance now, but they get levered in and out a little bit. And when they're recessed in, that can't happen. So you maintain the flow of the look of the guitar, but you're getting the strength and the stability of having those countersunk. The only problem is getting them. So the only people who make them are Dunlop, and they're like €20 a set, which isn't bad for strap locks, but I just have to get them in as well when I'm ordering them. There's nobody here locally who has them at the moment.
I've got to say they look really smart. And as soon as you just mentioned them, I thought, actually, I think I want to try them out on my builds because they do look good. And I do agree, often I just don't like strap pins, because when I was doing repair work, that seems to be one of the most common things that seems to be an issue for people with their guitars.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to relocate on the next guitar, I'm going to relocate it. So on the upper horn, I have it where a strap button would expect to be, but I'm actually going to put it on the rear and just have it going in. So you can connect your strap in from behind. I just think it'll look neater and it'll look nicer.
Yeah, one thing to consider about those flush mounts is the route is much, much bigger. So typically for a normal strap peg, you have like an 1/8" hole. Your hole now is massive. Like you're eating away a lot of wood, and the depth is pretty massive too.
Yeah, I actually really hit a roadblock with that. That's a really good point. So they're made in America, and they are made with American sizing. They're 3/8 of an inch, which I had to put on many thinking caps to try and decipher and figure out what the hell is that in millimeters. And it turns out it's 9.3 millimeters. It took me, I think, about 3 weeks to find somebody in Europe who would sell me a 9.3 millimeter drill bit, so that I could make the cavity to sink the damn things in. But you're right. So like you have to make this 9.3 millimeter, 3/8 of an inch. What's that? Is that like 1/32 of a cheeseburger for you Americans? I don't know. And you have to make that hole, and then you have to sink it in probably about 1/2 inch, because that's how deep the cup is. And then you have to put a deeper hole in again for the screw, because there's still a screw in there as well. And then if you're like a complete and utter freak like me, you're kind of going, I should probably put an old drop of glue in there too, just to make sure nothing comes out. So it becomes this ordeal of, it's now taking me an hour to fit strap locks. And as Mark correctly pointed out, you're digging into the body a little bit. But I think the juice is worth the squeeze. I think it looks good.
Have you put them on any of your other guitars?
Yeah, they're on almost everything in the room here.
So you've had to do that on all of your guitars then?
Yeah, I haven't done it to this one. You can see the nipple sticking up here.
Yeah.
And this one, because the thing is just too pointy here, there's no way for you to drill a circular hole in without losing that pointy shape. But anything that's got a kind of a round top on it, like the Warwick here, or the ESP, or the Bongo, or is that a Sire? That's a Sire. They've all got recessed strap locks on them. I just think it's neat and tidy.
Wait, look, I definitely want to get back to a question that Eddie asked really early on in the chat about EU and the new EU regulations and how it affects guitar builders. And it seems to be that everything you're saying, as someone that lives in the EU, someone that lives in the European Union, often what you're talking about is the cost of importing things from externally into the EU. And I've noticed, I don't know if any of you have noticed this, possibly not, on my Instagram feed in the last week and a half, leading up to tomorrow, when the new EU regulations come in, people who run small businesses that are particularly UK-based, or only UK-based businesses selling to the EU, are putting up notices saying, I'm sorry, but we can't sell to the EU for the foreseeable future because the regulations are becoming too complicated for us.
Yeah.
Have any of you seen that? I'll tell you a bit more about it if you're not aware of it.
I just saw the news today because we're having issues in Ireland where somebody crashed a boat into the port in Holyhead in Wales, which is where everything from England comes into Ireland. And now Amazon, instead of doing next day delivery, are saying, good luck and thanks, you'll get your stuff after Christmas when the boat is fixed. And then on top of it, this regulation has come in. And the first instinct I had on hearing it is, what kind of a dipshit brings in regulations like this just before Christmas when people are doing peak shopping?
Yes, because it literally comes into effect tomorrow, the 13th. So Eddie's question related to, in the long run, his question relates to, will it shut down the exporting of guitars from the UK to the rest of the world, or to Europe? But I've got the regulations open. It's so boring, I'm not going to read them all. But essentially, part of the regulation is, with a product that you're selling from the UK to the EU, you have to be able to say exactly where everything is sourced and give kind of safety regulations for it. And then if someone in the EU is to buy it and you're to send it to them, they need to be able to follow up if they've got any issues with the thing they're buying from you, with someone who is, as we would normally expect, at the end of a helpline. All businesses might have that, give product support and stuff, but that person has to be in the EU. So if you're a UK small company selling to the EU, you need to have a representative in the EU to be the person that is the go-to if there's a problem. And a lot of small businesses that make guitar parts and guitar things, like we had Ben from Mastertronics on recently, although I've not seen him post about this, but lots of those people are just one person companies.
Yeah.
So to employ someone else to do it is just bonkers. And what seems to be springing up is lots of companies, whether they're real or not, I don't know, saying, don't worry, we can be your representative in EU, we can deal with everything all that might come up, you just need to pay us this ridiculous fee. And because no one really understands what the situation is or how it's going to work, everyone's being cautious and just not selling, pulling back their stock, which I know for some people is potentially going to mean they can't run the business anymore.
Yeah, it's really complex, and I can understand the spirit of it, because even like I do a lot of work with the supply management of semiconductors, and we have to provide breakdown sheets of exactly where things like the tin and the iron and the silicon were sourced from, and in what quantities, and what kind of a supplier was used to provide them, and things like that. So we have to give those statements of fact if somebody asks them, and they need to be supplied when you're shipping from one global region to another, from Asia to Europe or Australia or America. But there needs to be a carve out. There needs to be a carve out for smaller businesses, for cottage industries, for the mom and pop store who just do the odd shipment here and there. I think somebody with the sensible head is going to have to look at this and say, for the smaller businesses, this isn't viable or sustainable or scalable. It's just, yeah, I think it's it's Brexit is the gift that keeps on giving, unfortunately. But yeah, there's going to have to be some sort of carve out for it for sure.
But what I don't understand though is because I've only seen it from the point of view of someone living in the UK. This is a regulation for people selling things from outside the EU into the EU. So presumably it's a rule or law or regulation that's going to affect anyone outside the EU. So that means American sellers as well, presumably.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, really. I mean, we're kind of weird because there's Europe, there's a bit of England in between, and then there's more Europe, which is Ireland. But our primary market for buying stuff for the longest time for goods and services has been the UK. Like, we are the only other country in Europe that drives on the same road side as you. So we used to buy all our cars from you, and we can't do that either. So it's actually, I see all of the wood suppliers in the UK, all of the guitar part suppliers in the UK, and I avoid them because I don't want to pay extra taxes today. They're going to avoid me from now on because they don't want to fill out all the paperwork. So it's just tough. I feel really badly for any small business that's going to be impacted with this. But I don't think we're going to see the end of it now. I think this is pushing out now, and I think they're going to have to do carve outs for smaller businesses. There's going to be too much feedback from it.
So I was thinking of it as the point of view of specifically guitar companies or people that make guitar products exporting into the EU. But of course, there's businesses in the EU that are going to be dependent on some of those things they're getting from the UK. As you're saying, you're going to be avoiding buying from the UK because of all the costs and things. So it's going to have knock-on effects, surely. It does seem weird. It reminds me of when the CITES laws got introduced that limited this or prohibited the sale of rosewood. So for quite a while, I just stopped selling to America. I think it was about 6 or 7 months while I was trying to get my head around it. I can't sell the guitars I've already made because I can't have proof of origin of where all the woods came from because these regulations have been introduced after I bought the woods. So how can I prove that this wood wasn't chopped down from an endangered tree? Then I noticed lots of companies selling, like Fender, changing the woods they were using to make it easy to sell. I noticed lots of companies selling the same guitars, but they just renamed the wood. So I'm sure basically lots of stock for these made in China guitars that have been more unscrupulous companies just pretending weren't rosewood or whatever. And then the regulations changed so that for certain types of businesses, I think this is right anyway, for certain types of businesses, it was fine. Because it is almost impossible to track back all of that information. And when you're just dealing with like instruments using rosewood, it's maybe less impactful than other businesses. But as I'm sure we're going to talk about soon, when you get the scale up of 10,000 guitars, it's going to have an impact. But it seems to have just been overwritten because of the overall impact it was having. So I wonder if that will happen here.
Yeah, I think time is going to play that one out. I don't think we're going to have any of the answers today, unfortunately.
I will say, if anyone's listening in the EU that wants to buy a guitar from me, I am still going to be shipping to the EU because what I've decided is when the first one happens, I'm just going to try and work it all out then, use it as a test, potentially give the person that's buying it a little bit of a discount because there might be a delay in getting it to them, and try and work out how to do it, because it is ridiculous if I just shun away from trying to sell to, I think I sell about a third of my instruments to the EU. It's just not going to work, really.
Just grab a Ryanair flight.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It might be cheaper for me just to fly it myself buy a seat for it.
Yeah.
But surely you were mentioning that there's like loopholes, right? There could be loopholes. And it kind of seems like what I'm hearing here is that you can't sell something. So like, what if you sold something else and gave the guitar away for free? Does that still count? Like you sold a $2,000 pick, for example, and it comes with this free guitar.
See, one of the things I'm looking at is if you're selling something like that, Mark, I know when I ship abroad and I ship to the EU, you have to declare everything that is in the contents of what you're shipping. And for tax purposes, the people that are buying from me have to pay import duties, and the cost of the import duties is combined for everything that's in the shipment, and sometimes it includes the cost of the shipment. And then you have to declare, particularly back when there were the CITES issues, you had to declare where everything comes from in it. So I think when you look at the paperwork, they're not going to care that you paid for the pick and you're getting the free guitar. It's everything that's enclosed in that package. But
It's a nightmare.
I'm not sure if it applies if I was just a person sending, say, Owen an instrument as opposed to a business selling it. I'm not 100% clear on that. It doesn't seem to be the issue because I'm not a business. If I'm sending it to someone as a friend, he doesn't need a port of call for product safety or follow-up, or if they've got issues with it. So there potentially may be ways around it. For people selling guitars where you're selling 2 or 3 a year to Europe, there might be ways around it, but I don't know. Don't know to happen. And also, sorry, just to drop this in, courier companies are hit and miss. And it's not just one courier is better than the other, but I found a company who I won't name, who I thought were really good until recently, when they charged a client of mine in France quite a lot of customs duties on a guitar which he shouldn't have paid duties on, because I sent it to him. It needed some work, so he sent it back, and then I sent it back to him again. So it went back to him with the same courier, and in the documentation I have to fill in, it's a return because it'd been sent here for repair. It had no extra duties to pay because they could see he'd already paid it the first time round, but they still made him pay 200 euros or 250 euros duties at either that, or it was going to be like destroyed or confiscated. So, you know, couriers do what they want.
Yeah.
Of all the parts and things that go into something like a guitar, how the hell could you possibly be expected to know the origin of everything?
100%, Scott. I think that's what's interesting. We talked about this before with Josh from JHS Pedals. The fact that he pays maybe more by having everything made in the USA might cost a bit more, but not only is he supporting his economy, there's also that manufacturer chain. You can find out where everything actually comes from. There's more control than if you're shipping in from China, for example. But yeah, there's too many bits to know.
Almost all the wood that I've used came from a shop down the road. That's as far as I know on the supply chain. Wow.
Yeah, that was the problem with the rosewood issue, was how can you track where it came from? And you'd ask a supplier and they wouldn't necessarily have it because up until that point they didn't need it. Actually, Eddie, if Eddie's still in the chat, what would be interesting to know is how is this going to affect Eddie when he's literally cutting down his own wood from where he lives? If you put that on your customs documentation, I chopped this wood down myself, would they believe you? Is that legitimate? How do you prove? You send them a photo or a video of you with your small tree.
Oh my God!
Ridiculous bureaucracy. So on a tangent, I'm sure we'll get back more to you specifically, Owen. But off air, we were just talking about the cost of things. Owen mentioned that there's a new bass that he's getting soon, which is a Mark bass one, which is more of a budget line, 300 euros, I think you said, or under 300 euros. And we were talking about how can you reduce the cost to be able to sell, the cost of parts to be able to sell like that. And I had no idea how many units are produced for something like this. Owen, did you say you knew from your visit to Mark Bass how many they make?
Not for that particular bass, but for the Surf Green guy here. That's a bass that retails for about 550, maybe 600 euros thereabouts. It's a lovely bass, and they actually sell the preamp separately for like 150 euros. And it's the same preamp in this as in this, and this is like a 3,500 euro bass. So it's a really good preamp, and they don't scrimp on the cost of electronics there. And it's a bespoke thing, set in resin, really high quality pots. So there's no cost saved on that aspect. But the bass itself is mostly, it's mostly made in Indonesia, and it's brought back to Europe, and then there's a quality check and a setup and fret dressing done here. And when I visited the factory, I think they had B stock. They had a quantity of B stock units of like, I don't know, was it 500 or 600 units or something like that? But that to me would imply, and I don't have any data to back it up, but that to me would imply like a production run of, it must be somewhere close to 8 or 10K if you're going to have that B stock. Because when you ramp up any new production line, that's why you get B stock, is you ramp up a new production line for the first time. And you don't know what you don't know. So all these, I guess what you would call in the industry, unknown unknowns, you think your assembly line is perfect, and then you start banging stuff through and stuff breaks and stuff isn't right, and you have to adjust your spray guns, or get your paint from a different supplier, or get your pickups from a different supplier. You're going to have those issues at the start. And I think after that, then your B stock diminishes significantly, and you get it down to kind of single units, which is what any company would accept. But yeah, you've got to be doing big volume to hit those kind of price points, and to have the buying power from the people who are making the hardware as well. Like that's one thing we suffer from as builders. We tend to buy hardware in single units, right? We buy one bridge, we buy one set of tuners, we buy one set of pickups, and we get reamed without loop every single time. It's great. And it's worse again for me, and I'm going to sing my usual song of having to bring everything in from abroad. But if you're a company and you're saying, hey, Schaller Tuners, we want to put your brand on our guitar, which will give you marketing presence, and we would like to buy 10,000 sets of tuners from you, that's got to seriously bring down the price. It's not going to bring it down to 10% of the margin or anything like that. That's not feasible. But these companies are probably operating on a kind of a 40% markup. Maybe they'll go down to 30 if you're buying bulk. I don't know. I'd love to see the numbers at scale.
But presumably also, if a company like that is now going to make 10,000 for a particular brand, they're potentially going to be upping their production and therefore reducing the cost per unit. Because again,
or upping their production and having to hire more people.
Yeah, I mean, I've got no idea, for example, how many sets of locking tuners Schaller sell each year. Yeah. I mean, I know it's not hundreds. I'm sure it's not just thousands, but how many is it?
And what's weird to me as well is that, like, we pay full price for stuff as luthiers, because we're all kind of hobbyists. But like in every other industry where there is people doing things, either as, I don't know how I qualify us. Are we semi-pros? We're not pros, but are we semi-pros? If you're a mechanic working out of your home here in Ireland, you can go to the garage and you can say, I'd like to get those parts that are on the shelf for €100 at a trade discount, and they give them to you for €85 because you're associated with trade. We don't have that luxury. We pay full price for everything. So that's something I think I'd love if some luthier supplier came along and said, we're going to undercut all the others. If you can show us your social media presence or show us what you're banging out, it would be great. But unfortunately, we do pay full price for stuff.
It's funny talking about that, because apparently there are some places where you should be able to get wholesale or at least a little bit of a discount. And in the past, thinking about it, if you were doing something as a business, you have a tax code. But I mean, now that things are so much more international, that doesn't mean anything outside of the States. It was kind of funny to me to find out that they kind of base it on whether or not you have like a website where it looks like you're a legitimate business. I mean,
yeah. It's gone that way in industry as well. Like, when I work with a lot of companies, and when I'm looking to see is the company legitimate, I have to check a website. I have to check, is their address an actual address, or is it an apartment in a block of flats? And then the kind of the golden egg then basically is, do they have this thing called a DUNS number, which is like an international company number to say, hey, I'm here and I exist. But I think, like, that's great if you're dealing with entities that are pretty big and have a couple of employees and stuff. But like, using the mechanic analogy again, if you're a mechanic that works in a dealership Monday to Friday, and then at the weekends you have your own workshop and you bang out, 5-10 oil changes at the weekend, you should be able to get those discounts. And you don't necessarily have to have a registration number. In Ireland, you don't need to register for VAT, for example, until you're selling more than €35,000 worth of stock annually. So you can literally just say, I'm a company, but I have no registration number. And that rocks away just fine. I think that's one thing I think we could do with support on is the price of the hardware that we pay for, because we're treated exactly the same as the lad who's got a €5,000 guitar and decides he's going to change his Floyd Rose from black to silver and pay full retail over the shelf for it.
Yeah, well, the last few bills I've done, it was like $550 in hardware.
Yeah,
hardware and electronics.
Crazy.
I mean, I you go to Guitar Center and buy a guitar for $300, and I've got $550 just in hardware and electronics.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to get a little bit of a break on that.
I would say that if you're able to buy direct from some of the companies and you message them about what you're building, a lot of companies are really friendly and open to builders. So, like, for example, the first time this happened to me was FU Tone, Floyd upgrade. They make Floyd Road bridges and upgrades for them. My client wanted something very specific, so I emailed them to ask about it. And at the same time, I needed another one of their bridges. And I had a great chat, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we see you're a builder. We're happy to do a bit of a discount, and if you want to buy more from us, we can do that." I feel really guilty because I've never needed one of their bridges again since. Not that I didn't like them; I thought they were brilliant. But yeah, sometimes people are open to supporting smaller builders, and I don't have any affiliate links with All Parts, but I know All Parts do have a trade site, and I've bought from them before. I can't remember how you register with that, but I think even as a hobby builder that you could potentially access that, because as you're saying, Owen, it is different to someone that's just buying to upgrade something. Presumably they want to support someone who potentially might be making more in the future, because All Parts is partly aimed at selling to people that just want to upgrade, but partly it is aimed at luthiers and builders.
And what does this all really mean? Like, in the end, like if we get a discount on hardware and we save, let's say, Scott, you gave an example, you spent $550 on hardware the last build. What if you were to save, I don't know, 10, 20%? What does that even mean? Like, when we sell this guitar, are we absorbing that, or are we still selling at what we would normally sell a guitar for? Like, I don't understand what the end goal is on a discount, because all business is the next guy paying more than what you paid for. That's the way capitalism and business works.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering what does this really mean for us as luthiers buying at the full price?
I think what Scott mentioned with the price of hardware versus a finished instrument retailing in a shop is interesting, because obviously it's difficult to compete on that level, right? Fender releases 3 million guitars a year and they're all identical, just with different paint finishes. It's like, I don't know if you watched early Simpsons, it's like Malibu Stacy with a new hat. But it's basically, you can't compete on that scale. And if Scott's trying to make money on an instrument, the end goal in this particular scenario is that he doesn't have to change his retail price point, but his profitability just went up.
But
that's sophisticated, because sometimes I don't actually have a buyer, yet. I'm exceptionally in the hobby category. I just want to do a build, and I've gotten to where I have a set of hardware that I like to work with. So I mean, generally, it's coming out of my pocket to begin with. If I can sell it to finance the next build, for fun, awesome. But since I'm not actually doing it really, for, in the context of a business, it's kind of just out of my pocket.
Yeah,
it could reduce the costs. That reduces your initial outlay, makes it easier for you as a person to build. Back to what Mark's saying, though, it's interesting because there's two things I think of as a boutique builder and getting a discount like that. When I've worked with a client and I've given them a cost for something and they say, "Oh, I want this bridge or whatever," if I can get a discount, then they already know how much they think they're spending on it. That discount goes to me. I get a little bit more profit from it. But if I was to make in advance and get a lower price hardware, for example, I could technically sell my instrument a bit cheaper, make it more affordable for someone, but as we say all the time, how on earth do you value or price a lot of our instruments when it takes so much time and cost, time cost is put into making the guitars, that it's hard to really sell it at a value that equates to a cost of all the parts, plus the time you spent doing it, plus all the periphery that goes around having a business, etc. I just have a set price now for my instruments. They're this price, and if someone's got a more expensive pickup in it, or it's an 8-string versus 6-string, then I make a bit less profit.
And I think we've said that before, where there's people in the trade have said it as well, where you have the people who are buying the budget instruments, and they will buy the budget instruments, and then you have this void in the middle where people used to spend money on reasonably priced instruments. They don't anymore, so they get budget instrument or premium instrument, and that's where we sit. No, I haven't sold a single instrument. I've made one, but I haven't sold it, and I'm not going to sell it. But I think if you're pitching your handmade bespoke instruments at anything less than that price point, you're doing yourself a disservice.
With time and expertise that goes into a build, I don't think it's possible to sell one for what what you really put into it. So if hardware was totally free,
yeah, exactly. It's a really,
taking a loss, really.
It was a really good question, Mark, to think about that. It's hard to think. It just reinforces how making one-off guitars isn't necessarily the most viable business model. By the way, Daniel from Unquendo Guitars is in the chat. So if you missed it, Daniel, Owen mentioned you earlier on. Hey, look, I don't want to be the person that puts the capitalism into this podcast, but if anyone is thinking of buying some parts, we've got some affiliate links in the description below. So I do get a little bit of a knockback from it, but also like the ones with the Geiger, for example, there's a 15% off code there. Cool.
Geiger's good stuff.
Yeah,
I like all the Geiger stuff. I like everything.
Because this is another thing then to talk about, Mark. The idea of getting free components, free guitars for making videos. Why should we just get that? How does that work? Because I can see a difference, for example, Mark, where Geiger have sent you things and you've made a video, and they've sent me things to make a video, because the way it stands, your videos are going to get, I was going to say 10, but 100 times the amount of views mine have. So the reach for Geiger through your videos seems more evident than them sending them to me. But at the same time, they seem to want to send them out to people. And maybe it's because they know I'm potentially going to buy some more sets from them. I know already that I've made a short about one thing they sent me, and someone's bought a set of them. So, and I'm in that video, I showed something else I bought myself from Geiger, and someone has since bought that from Geiger because of it. So even a video that hasn't got many views has been useful for them. So they are making decisions, but how do they know who to send it to?
It's all free advertisement. And we talked about this, we're coming back around to scale, right? So they've produced and manufactured so many of these because they can, and it doesn't cost them anything to give out 100 or several hundred of these products to just everyday people to see if they like them. And they're great products. Like the Geiger tuners are like, they're as good as anything else. And I'm not just saying that because they sent me free stuff, but like I have them on that guitar, on that guitar, on that. I just put them on everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very happy to have them send them to me because I've been buying them already.
Yeah. Just a quick anecdote while we're still on the topic of capitalism. When I was researching my Parker Fly guitar video, I came across this anecdote that I thought I want to share. And so Ken Parker had this stunning, really innovative instrument, and then he was just hemorrhaging money, and so he had to sell the company, right? He had to sell the company, and he was hemorrhaging money because he was building $10,000 guitars and selling them for $3,000. That's the anecdote. So that goes back to what we were saying as kind of like trying to set a value on what we do and try to put a price on what we build. It's almost impossible. And Scott's right. Like we're putting so much time and level of effort and really high quality components in these things that we just can't sell them at the actual price. And Ken Parker's, that would have been a $10,000 guitar, but he sold them for $3,000 and he lost his company.
Because who's going to pay 10 grand for a guitar? I mean, it happens, but
Yeah.
I'm beginning to think I should try and sell mine for 10 grand because I'm not selling them for the amount I'm selling them at. Why not see? You know,
I heard a story. I heard a story about a guy in Texas that I don't know exactly where he is. I was thinking it was relatively local, but it might have been Austin. But he got one in the hands of Billy Gibbons, and he can sell a build for 10 grand, but it seems really rare. I mean, how many people are going to pay that kind of money for a guitar?
It just takes one person.
That doesn't have Slash's blood on it or something, you know?
Well, the same thing. I had some art. I had some guitars in a gallery, an art gallery, and the art gallery was set up to be a place to sell music-related artwork and instruments that were artworks in themselves. And one of the people that the gallery was representing was someone that just painted designs onto guitars and had, you know, I think she'd been running it as a business. I don't know if it'd been a viable business or not, but Paul McCartney bought one of her guitars and played it live, and then she's done. You know, she's got a business now where people are willing to pay that much because Paul McCartney has got one by her. So it's just like anything in the art world, and I feel like that's basically what boutique instruments are. Once you can reach a point where people are paying for it and people are aware that that's what people pay for it, it begins to change how you can advertise or market or sell, or how people can see the worth in it. There was a call out today. This is so boring what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. There was a call out today for artists and architects to design a monument for Queen Elizabeth II, who passed away last year before. And it's got a budget of between 40 and 50. I was about to say 40 or 50,000, but it must be way more than that. Now I'm saying it. Maybe it's 400 to 500,000. And they're just a call out for people to do it. And I was thinking, there's no way they're going to anyway look at someone who's got a really good proposal if they're not well known, because you don't want to spend that much money on an idea or on a concept or something unless it's by an established person. I mean, I might be wrong, but for a young architect, for a young artist who's got something that's amazing, who was maybe affected by the Queen in some way, they're not going to be in with a chance for that. That's off on a tangent, but the idea is people put value on names, as we always say. That's why Gibsons cost that much, why Fenders cost that much.
Yeah, there's a friend of mine who lives in Tuscany. He's a luthier, Bacci Guitars, BACCI, Bruno, and he's been making some really cool baritones and things like that, and he's kind of carved out his own little niche. And he was selling the baritones for, you know, what you'd expect them to go for, kind of like $3,500 department. And he got his hands on some bodywood. I'm not sure which wood it was. I think it's alder. But it had been absolutely torn apart by woodworm. So the body was just holes everywhere. This thing looked like, you know, Swiss cheese on steroids. And he came up with a process to ensure all of the woodworm was dead, effectively putting the slabs of wood into what looks like a giant microwave and cooking whatever's in there, and made bases out of them. And so he made this bass, just a 4-string bass, really nice neck, really nice body, but it came with all of this kind of built-in chambering because of all of these voids and hollows inside it. And he was at a gig where he was meeting Mark Lettieri from Snarky Puppy and giving him a baritone, and Michael Lee was there, who's the lead of Snarky Puppy, playing bass. And he said, "Michael, would you mind trying my bass?" Michael put on the bass and went, "Doodle-doo-doo-doo." And the band looked at him and went, "That's the best sounding bass you've ever put on." And he said to Bruno, "Do you mind if I play this tonight at the gig?" And Bruno was like, "Absolutely, drive on." Michael played the bass up on stage and came after the gig and said, "I have to have one." And then they came up with the idea of making a signature series of these basses. But because Michael's name is attached to them, they're like $8,000 for a 4-string bass with wood that you wouldn't think would, cost anything close to that. But the association is extraordinary. And then he's got other people playing his baritones now, like Matteo Mancuso, Corey Wong, people like that. And the price of his instruments is just incrementally crept up. And he's built a reputation as this little guy in Italy who's, it's almost like this magic behind the brand, that you go over there and you have the experience, and you go to the Italian restaurant with them and you get your instrument. And it's that kind of elusiveness that people are buying into. It's that I'm one of a very few amount of people who can be in this niche with that artist name, who can have something of a similar experience by purchasing the same instrument. So I think you're right. Names do definitely sell instruments.
Yeah, well, that's where somebody like me would have to let go of my concept of my quality and trust somebody else's, misguided desire to pay an exorbitant amount of money for something I made.
I'm not sure which guitar it is. It's a Gibson. One of the ones they did for Kirk Hammett, they made a limited run of them. They were 50 grand each. But what you got into it, I don't think it was the greeny one. I think it was one they did before that. But it was a copy of his guitar. What you have when you buy the guitar is an experience of going to the Gibson factory, of seeing where they're made, of seeing the guitar, of meeting Kirk Hammett. So you're buying into all of that as well. But I saw a picture of this particular one of these particular ones the other day, and it's been made to be relict, and the paint's peeling off it. It's like they've done a relic job, but they haven't done it so well that the relic's staying as it's meant to be a mirror of Kirk Hammett's one. It's peeling off. And this person couldn't work out if they were joking or if they were annoyed about the fact they spent 50 grand on a guitar that was falling apart. Look, so Daniel from Entropia Guitars just put in the chat, summing up what we've just been talking about, there is a concept behind all this called a Veblen good. So if you look up Veblen goods, it says the AI overview on Google describes as Veblen good as a luxury item that has an upward sloping demand curve, meaning that demand increases as the price increases. Maybe I should name my guitar brand the Veblen Guitars. This could be my way forward.
Veblen Guitars and Sons.
And Sons, yeah.
I've thought for a while that making it more expensive could very well lead to people thinking it was more valuable. I have personally always struggled with whether or not I feel like what I've made is actually worth all that money, but that a lot of that comes from inexperience too. Like I've said a few times, $2,000 would probably be a good price point for a lot of the stuff I make. I have no idea what a $2,000 guitar feels like or plays like or sounds like. I don't know how what I'm doing compares to something that legitimately costs that.
Isn't that self-scrutiny though? I think that really speaks to the pride you have in what you're putting together, what you're building.
Daniel again from Entropia said that customers who are in the market for a custom guitar expect a certain price point. So one thing I want to do in some future episodes is get a few people on that are part of a group of builders in the UK who are feeling a bit disenfranchised as boutique builders selling at guitar shows. I'm going to try and get a group of them on, because one of the things they're saying is, Daniel's saying they expect a certain price, but their experience of going to all the guitar shows in the UK is people are not going to pay that price anymore. Like they can't. When I first started selling at guitar shows, $2,000 to $2,500 was what you'd expect for a boutique guitar. People aren't buying. Ben from Marstronics was saying that I think it was PJD Guitars that put some of his components in. One of their distributors in Europe was saying that if your guitars are between about 800 and 3,000, they're just not selling anymore. It's the cheaper guitars and the more expensive guitars that's selling. And maybe it's hard now for a boutique builder to up their price to be like $3,000 or $3,500, but they can't drop it because then they just wouldn't be able to afford it.
I'd put a $10,000 price tag on something that I made, but okay, whether or not it's worth it is one thing, but I am absolutely terrified for somebody to pay money for something I did and then be disappointed in it.
I'm still looking here for like the bigger picture. Like if we zoom out, right, and look at the bigger picture, like how is it that boutique builders are defining success, and how do boutique builders expect to grow, right? And if you can kind of consider those two things, then maybe you'll get a better understanding of how to price your goods. Because I think if you look back at like precedent, if you look at Strandberg, for example, who started off just doing custom builds, he didn't get to scale or growth until he started building overseas, right? And I think that's the direction that a lot of companies take to grow, and that is to go overseas and get a cheaper product to give to the masses. So if your definition of success is to grow and to scale, then that's going to look different than if your definition of success is to sell an $8,000 guitar to celebrities.
Hey, look, anyone's listening, let us know in the comments if anything we're talking about is particularly interesting for you, so we can get more guests on that kind of fit in with that. Because I definitely want to get those people on that are in that sort of disenfranchised boutique world. But I also know a few people that have grown their boutique business, so they're not yet making it abroad. They're not yet having other people building with them, but they're struggling to keep up with demand of what they're building. So that might be a good guest to have on. Coincidentally, Daniel's just mentioned Daisy Tempest. I'm going to be messaging her, see if I can get her on, but we'll see. And also on a tangent to that, I've been wondering recently, when we've been talking about free products, etc., I've been working with a company called Nitalac for a while now. They've been supplying me with products, sometimes for free, sometimes a good discount, and I really like their products. But they make quite an interesting range where they're trying to mimic traditional guitar products, guitar finishes. And I wondered whether it'd be interesting to get someone like that on to talk about the production behind that and how they do all that research, because it's not something we ever talk about. But I wasn't sure if it's suitable to get someone on, because it's a bit like advertising them.
I'd be very interested in that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Nice. And on that front, there's affiliate links below for Nitalac. But just putting that out there. Hey, listen, we've been talking for quite a while, so gonna finish off in a moment. But I've got a few things that I do want to mention about forthcoming episodes. I haven't scheduled anything yet, but if you follow the link in the description to our playlist, you can see the future scheduled ones when they go up to 6 weeks in advance. That's the most I can do. But we have got some people coming on that we've been asked about before. Todd from Sweet Tea, Gio from Tonelli Guitars that Owen mentioned earlier, they're launching something soon. I think it might be this week or next week. Don't know what it is, but I asked them if they'd want to come on. So they're going to come on sometime the end of January to discuss whatever their new product is, but also just to discuss guitar building. So that'd be cool. Andrew Knight from Nitro Guitars from Charvel Jackson. He's one of their, what was he? Is he their main builder? Main
Head designer?
Head designer, that's it. He was mentioned last week because he's friends with Mike from Ingold, and I'm going to get them two on together. They're both up for it. And I think in that one, we're going to talk more about design ethics, because if you remember, Mike was a lecturer in design at a university. Andrew was one of his students. Now they both make guitars. So that might be an interesting take on not necessarily hearing more about their backgrounds, but hearing more about wider design and how the wider design world might fit into guitar building, and how for a big company like Jackson, who've just got this new range out, how design is used and how they kind of decide what is right and what's wrong for their customers. We can also then talk about scale, maybe how many that they're producing. And then next week, Owen's joining us again, having as he said, this might be the last time until next December, when he's tends to be free on a Thursdays to join us. Next week we've got a special on, and I've forgotten the name. I've forgotten everyone that's in it, because there's a few different people in it. But we're going to have Mark's back with us, Owen's back with us, Ray from Tasmaniak Guitars will be here, Glyn from Mr. Glyn's Pickups, and myself. And then we've got Jack from JC Guitars, all of whom use 3D printing in some ways. So myself and Glyn, we're very new to it. everyone else is more experienced. Ray does it for a profession outside of guitar building. He also runs massive 3D printing guitars. We're going to try and have an episode that starts off nice and simple for people like me who have just started the journey into 3D printing, and maybe gets much more complex and is like a deep dive into how 3D printing works. So that should be a great one. And if people have got another suggestion of a deeper topic they want, let us know about that. I think have I covered everything?
Yep.
Owen, I'm sure we've got more to talk about as well, so that might come up next week as well. But again, just to mention on the sort of support front and how much time it takes to make videos, a massive thank you to everyone that is a member, because all your small contributions do help with the running of the channel and running of all the streams and the hosting, etc. So our members include Every Guitar Has a Story, Big Unit Guitars, Daniel Marquez, Dinsey, Gabrielle Retti, and Owen from Entropia Guitars, Electric Lady Guitars, Adair Guitars, BB Guitars, Simon from Chapman, well, I was about to say from Chapman Guitars, but it's Simon Chapman Guitars, Mr. Glyn's Pickups, Dave Dickens, and Dave Dickens even, and Tasmaniak Guitars. Yeah, thank you all. Right, if you want to find any of us, we've got all our links in the descriptions, etc. Would anyone like to say something to end?
Something to end. Ta-da!
Thank you. Get through that uncomfortable silence that I always have. Right, see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks.
The Guitar Builders Collective is a group of like-minded people from all around the world at different stages of their guitar building journey. You can join us over on our forum to seek advice or share tips on guitar building processes, materials and tools, or just to share your builds. On YouTube, we have a regular podcast of guitar building chat where you can join the live stream or watch back on past episodes. Our Instagram page shares posts of members' builds and links you direct to their accounts. And for those of you on Facebook, we've got a private group that you can join, share and chat along with. The Guitar Builders Collective is a welcome and open space for all, so do pop by and say hi.